It's time now for Korea Book Club, our weekly segment exploring the world of Korean literature and books through notable recent works in English translation and in Korean too. This week we have joining us a cultural essayist Colin Marshall and author of the essay collection 한국 요약 금지. He joins us here in the studio. Colin, hello. It's great to see you again.
Glad to be back.
Okay, so we have an interesting one this week. Today we're talking about a translated novel by a Korean writer whom English language readers may know but may not have heard from in quite some time. So, who are we talking about this week?
We're talking about Jo Kyung-ran, or Kyung-ran Jo, as her book covers call her in the West. Longtime fans of Korean literature in translation may remember the critical acclaim received by Tongue, her previous novel published in English back in 2009. That translation, by Kim Ji-young, followed fairly closely on that book's original publication in Korea. But the novel with which Jo Kyung-ran followed it up came out in 2010, and it's taken a full 15 years to become available in English as Blowfish. Thanks once again, by the way, to Kim Ji-young. Now, listeners who read Tongue may well recognize a fair few of the elements of Blowfish, including suicide, architecture, foreign culture, wintry emotional climates, the salvation to be found in the act of creation, and not least, the importance of what you eat. Now, I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say that when many Americans of my generation think of Blowfish, not the novel but the actual fish, what comes to mind is an early episode of The Simpsons, in which the family has dinner at a Japanese restaurant.
Right.
Homer demands to be served everything on the menu, which finally includes fugu, Japanese for blowfish, whose flesh is deadly poisonous unless prepared by a master chef. Fugumi, Homer nevertheless insists, and only after he's eaten his fill is he informed that he has, after all, consumed the poison. He spends the rest of the episode getting his affairs in order, only to wake up the next morning to find, of course, that he's alive after all, whereupon he resolves to live life to its fullest. But then this is Homer Simpson we're talking about, so of course he forgets that resolution before the next episode begins.
Yes, I definitely know the reference you're talking about, and I think it does betray our age as well,
Perhaps.
Unfortunately. But yes, it's definitely made the dangers of Blowfish famous, I would say. Is this something that's addressed in Cho's book as well? I mean, that Simpsons episode certainly mined a lot of humour and emotion from the near-death experience story. But for those who know Cho's works, I think they might expect her to give a bit more of a solemn treatment, should we say.
Indeed. The Simpsons episode wasn't that inaccurate about the mechanics of fugu, but in this novel, death by fugu, or as we'd say in Korean, bugo, isn't something that happens accidentally, but only after the utmost deliberation. When the novel begins, one of its two unnamed perspective characters, a fairly successful Korean artist, a kind of sculptor, is already planning her own demise. Now, the reasons she wants to commit suicide aren't yet made clear, but they seem to have to do with the death of her own grandmother, which occurred after she deliberately ate poisonous blowfish soup at the dinner table. So, required by a gallery show to make a work trip to Tokyo, this artist comes across a small blowfish shop there and immediately feels compelled to return over and over again, until the proprietor agrees to teach her how to prepare that fish, which takes a lot of skill and time and effort. Like many Japanese characters in non-Japanese stories, the shop owner, referred to as Abe-san, is obsessively dedicated to his craft, and in fact exclusively works with wild blowfish, imported from his hometown of Shimonoseki. Farmed blowfish aren't poisonous, he explains, but they just don't taste the same as wild ones, and eating them, one might imagine, doesn't deliver quite the same frisson of danger as the wild, poisonous blowfish. And what Abe-san seems on some level to suspect is that the poison is just what the artist wants. Indeed, for much of the novel, her progress toward a death just like her grandmother's seems more or less inexorable.
Okay, so this story is also about life and death then, but more specifically about suicide. You said the artist character is successful enough that she's putting on shows in Tokyo. So what drives her towards suicide then? Is that explored in the book? Is a case of money and fame becoming sources of despair rather than satisfaction?
Jo Kyung-ran portrays this artist as being in many ways alone in the world. Her father, a woodworker, clearly never overcame his own mother's suicide, her grandmother's suicide, and appears destined to commit a similar act himself. Now, this artist, she's long been involved at arm's length with a married man in Seoul, even lives in a house provided by him, and Apart from the sort of dislocation of her life, the more devastating thing is an apparent loss of direction in her work. She doesn't know what, if anything, she has to create next, and all this is compounded by her chance meeting in Tokyo with a man of the profession known as death cleaner. That is, he's hired in advance by would-be suicides to clean up the scene of their deaths. All the pieces seem to have aligned neatly for the artist to take herself out of the world until she meets the novel's other perspective character, a Korean architect working in Tokyo, at loose professional lens himself, and still disoriented by his brothers jumping from a high-rise window, a few years earlier.
Wow, okay, so this is a work that very much confronts the idea of suicide then. Okay, so we have two protagonists, both Korean, both of whom create things in the physical world, both of whom have been afflicted by family suicides as well. So how does Jo handle telling the story from both of their perspectives?
Well, Blowfish comprises 67 short chapters, all written in the same third-person narration, but alternating between the artist, whom we only know as she, and the architect, whom we only know as he. One of the most fascinating ways Jo Kyung-ran exploits this technique, this storytelling technique, is to emphasize the different ways in which each character perceives the space around him or her. The urban space, to be more specific, since every scene of the story takes place in either Seoul or Tokyo. The artist perceives these cities in a manner you'd expect from someone who works in media like sculpture and installation, and the architect sees them in a more technical but no less emotional way, and in fact a more emotional way, given the lengths to which Jo Kyung-ran goes to emphasize the lack of feeling that has come to afflict the artist.
Is this the kind of story then in which two lost souls come to find each other and find hope with each other, or is it something a bit different?
Well, you could say that, although I don't imagine the readers of the dedicated readers of Jo Kyung-ran would expect quite so conventional a narrative, quite so romantic a narrative.
Right, okay.
After she has these two characters cross paths by chance in Tokyo the first time, she has them meet again and again, ever more deliberately, in different parts of the city, having conversations in equal parts disjointed and revealing. And I don't think it would do injustice to say that what connection these characters manage to find saves them in some sense, though Blowfish is less a romance than an inquiry into what keeps people living, especially if they live to create, like an artist or an architect. I don't know whether Jo Kyung-ran has ever seen The Simpsons, which was never as popular here in Korea as it was in other countries, but she does pepper the book with conspicuous references to Western culture. One thematically relevant object, referenced more than once in fact, is a portrait of Ernest Hemingway, hanging in a Korean-run Tokyo bar. Now, one could consider a figure like Hemingway and ask why artists commit suicide. But Jo Kyung-ran, I suspect, finds just as much interest in the question of why they don't, what stops them.
Well, considering how it starts, it doesn't sound all grim then, but perhaps thought-provoking and melancholic, and perhaps a dash of hope in there as well. It sounds like quite a compelling work indeed. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but our pick once again this week was Blowfish by Jo Kyung-ran, translated into English by Kim Ji-young. Colin, thank you for that review once again. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll catch up with you again next time. Take care.
See you next time.
And that is where we wrap up our show for today. Do join us again tomorrow for more news, views and reviews from Korea. Till then, we hope you have a great day. I've been your host, Kwon Jang-ho, and thank you as always for listening. Goodbye.
KBS World Radio